talking about scaling a practice. So we're going to jump right into it, but first, how many practices do you have right now?
Currently we have 16 practices, hoping to be at around 20 by the end of the year, but 16 today.
That's a lot of practices.
It's not a small number.
Yeah.
4 years ago we had 3 practices, so it's a big number that's getting bigger fast.
Yeah, so you're scaling and you're scaling fast. So I guess the first question I have for you is, why?
It's a really good question. That's a question my wife asks me all the time. A number of years ago, I was at a conference and had dinner, lunch, that kind of thing with some of the guys in the profession like Walt West, Gary Gerber, Neil Gailmard, and came home from that conference convinced that doing optometry the same way we had always done it was just not going to work long term. I had a partner younger than myself, and I said to him, Chris, we got to do something different. And so we decided after a lot of thought and discussion to get bigger. We knew we weren't good enough to get bigger and not smart enough to get bigger. We're good clinicians, but not really great businessmen yet. And so we took 2 years to get ready. We took 2 years of business classes. We hired personal business coaches. We read a lot of books. We did everything we could think of to get smarter and better, and then we launched.
Got it. So let's just paint a picture
Yep.
for those aspiring to scale practices, right? So you have a practice already.
Yep.
You know, you reach that point where you're deciding, hey, I think it's time to grow.
Yep.
When do you know it is time to grow? When do you know you're ready for that?
So you have to first decide, is growing the existing practice versus growing to a second practice? Because it's a different answer. Growing an existing practice, growing that one location, either by moving into new space, is a safer move. It's less expensive. There's less financial risk doing it that way. If you go to a second location, you have to be committed to the process. You've got to be committed to hiring more staff. You've got to be committed to increasing your fixed overhead, things you can't get out of. If you're expanding your footprint by growing your single location, you're still platforming on your existing staff. You're not necessarily adding a new lab. Those kind of things don't add up. So you got to know for sure that this is the direction you want to go. I would say that going from 1 to 2 sort of implies that you're thinking about going to 3 and then 4.
So how does starting a second location, let's just
Yep.
say you're going to start a second location, how is that different than a cold start practice, or is it very similar?
So let me ask, is the second location an acquisition of an existing practice or a cold start itself?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's just say that it's a cold start itself.
Okay.
How is that process a little different than if you were cold starting maybe your first practice?
Sure. So the first thing is you better do a lot of research. You need to make sure that you're going to a location, an area that is not going to poach from your first practice. You don't want to just have your existing patients move from practice number 1 to practice number 2 and help the second one but kill the first one. So it's got to be an area that needs that second location. You need to be committed to understanding your vision, your mission, your values, and it's time to start replicating those. And that's a process. That takes a lot of work, a lot of effort, and you have to be committed to it. Your leadership team has to understand it, has to be ingrained into them as well, because you can't be in 2 places at one time. And so somebody's going to be in that second location handling a disgruntled patient, handling an unhappy staff person, and it's not going to be you. So you have to have people in place who can do that for you and who understand what you're about.
Now let's say that you're going to take over an existing practice and make it your second practice.
Yep.
You know, how is that different, and how do you make sure that you're carrying your brand over to that new location? And what do you do with that existing staff that might already be there?
Yeah, good question. The advantage to acquiring the second location is you have a revenue stream in place. You know, you have some predictability for that location. You know this is the number of patients they saw last year. This was their revenue year over year. You can get into their key performance indicators and their metrics and understand those things. Gives you some ability to predict what year 1, year 2, year 3 are going to look like with your expertise brought in. The difficulty is they have their own culture. They have their own billing and coding and hours of operation and their own staff politics and all of those things. What I would say is we do acquisitions primarily. We've done very few cold starts. You have to be way more committed than you dreamt possible to that integration process. It takes more people to accomplish it well, present in that location for a longer period of time, than you dreamt you would need to. Otherwise, it just doesn't happen. And marrying those two cultures together is difficult. The other thing is to make sure you're looking at a clinic that already matches your DNA as best possible. You know, I say no to a fair number of practices that just don't share our philosophy of caring for people, how we take care of patients and staff. I can teach processes, I can teach framework management, we can improve billing and coding, we can do a lot of things. I can't teach DNA. Maybe I could, I just don't want to. I don't want to invest that kind of time and energy into teaching somebody how to love people well. So if they don't have that to begin with, if they don't match your culture to a reasonable degree, maybe take a pass.
Yeah, and when you're getting ready to, say, acquire a practice, or you're looking at practices to acquire, first question is how far away should that be from, your first practice, distance-wise, and what are, some of the key metrics that you look at when you're valuing these practices to see if it would make a good acquisition or not?
I think it varies a lot based on where you're at. If your existing location is more rural versus urban, that kind of thing. So if you're more urban, we have two practices that are 4.5 miles apart, and it works. They're both really good practices. They're on the same street, 4.5 miles apart. We acquired each of those practices. I have more rural practices where I wouldn't put two practices within 15 miles of each other because they just would poach from each other too much. You do want them close enough that you can achieve some economy of scale. You want to be able to share staff. You want to be able to share administration. You want to be able to share marketing. You want to sort of be able to cross-platform between them as best possible so that when opticians from this location are on vacation or sick, you can pull somebody from that one and easily move them over and the practice doesn't suffer in the process. So they got to be close enough to achieve the benefit of having multiple locations. How far that is varies based on where you're at in population density and that kind of thing. The second part of your question was what things are you looking for? You want to look at just the normal financial metrics of a practice. Are they healthy? If they're perfectly healthy and they're doing everything right, that's not exactly who I'm wanting to buy, right? Because that's like buying a stock at its very, very highest.
Right.
I need a place that hopefully I can go in and fix some stuff. There needs to be some low-hanging fruit so that I can get a relatively quick return on investment. So maybe they don't do optical very well at all. They're great at the medical stuff. They're great at professional fees. Their patients love them. They come back every year to see them. They've never cared about selling glasses or doing annual supply of contacts. Or maybe their billing is really lousy. Things that I can fix quickly allow us to go in and get a quick pop on our ROI.
Got it. So now that you have two locations, now you're thinking bigger scale, right? So how do you keep going with this? I mean, when do you reach a point where you say, okay, I've got too much, or let's keep going, and why do you want to keep going?
For us, we decided if we're going to do this, it doesn't make sense to do it partly, right? It's either do it and go for the whole thing, or not at all. If you sort of in my opinion, the weakest place to be is 3, 4, 5 clinics, because then you've not quite achieved the economy of scale yet. If you're going to go bigger, you've got to invest a lot of time and energy and financial resources and everything else in your back office. You've got to start looking at, okay, if I don't have a really strong business manager, either myself or my partner, we got to hire somebody. We got to hire marketing. We've got to hire IT and facilities. You start to have these specialized departments in your back office. So, in our back office, we have separate facilities for back office, and currently we have about 30 staff full-time in that. We just moved into new space. We're over the next 18 months figuring that we're probably going to ramp up to about 60 people in the back office.
Yeah, and so who ends up managing all the staff? Because as you keep growing and growing, your staff gets bigger and bigger. Associate doctors, increasing number. Who starts to manage everybody? Because there's no way you can keep track of everything.
Right.
So what do you do?
One of the things is you've got to be willing to understand you're going to have to come out of the exam room to a large degree. And it's a gradual process. I was blessed to be an in-the-room optometrist for 25 years, one of the great privileges of my life. I can't run this business in the exam room. So I'm still investing in people. I get to be a part of people's stories, which is what I love about optometry, just differently now. So my partner, an optometrist, and I are both out of the exam room entirely now. We have, in the different departments, a very well-organized organization chart, and who this person reports to, who this person reports to, that kind of thing. We have a CEO who is not an optometrist, but he has a lot of business experience. He's a business pro with a lot of experience in multi-clinic optical space. if you don't have good system and good org chart in place, everything just gets confusing. Nobody quite knows what's going on and who they need to talk to.
When we look at, you hear the term strength in numbers
Yep.
all the time, right?
Yep.
And when you have that many practices, let's just talk about some of the, the strength that it gives you and number-wise. So when you think about just, let's just talk about income for a second,
Yep.
right? So, you have a practice and it does, a certain amount of money, let's just say, a second location, third location. Is that like, and I'm sure this varies wildly, but is that, okay, so now your income's looking at 2x, 3x, 4x, or is it more of kind of like exponential growth as you add more practices?
First of all, you've got to decide where the money's going to go, right? And we're pouring it back into our business. My partner and I, our personal income's the same as what it was just about compared to when we started this. I'm having a lot more fun. I'm really having a lot of fun. It's not that I'm making a ton more money. We're pouring it into people and resources and infrastructure and to IT and everything else. It will pay off. We're not doing it for the current income aspect of it. The advantages to being bigger are things like improved cost of goods sold, right? We're proud members of Vision Source because of all the other stuff they do for us. The cost of goods side, we could probably achieve the same thing without. We can go to our chief vendors and negotiate really good pricing because of our size. We recently hosted our own version, our internal Triangle Visions Expo event, and we closed all of our businesses for a full day, and we did a much scaled down version of this there in Raleigh, North Carolina, and had all of our staff from every clinic and our support center come to that event. And vendors were there, and it was fun and interactive, and we had keynote speakers and things. We can do those things. We can offer a much more robust benefits package to our people than we could when we were small. Those kind of things are where you start to achieve the benefits of scale. Better marketing results, all of that starts to pay off as you continue to roll.
Yeah. So I guess if you just had to leave us with, if you're a practice owner and you're looking to grow into,
Yep.
A second location, multiple locations or more, what is the, top 3 things that you need to do today to achieve that goal?
So it's a little bit like my family does baseball. We're baseball people. If you're a player and trying to grow from low minor league ball up to the major leagues, sort of every step of the way, you have to recommit to excellence. You've got to be willing to learn more and to work harder. This is a little bit like that. You have to understand that you don't know everything. So read. Read Good to Great. Read Becoming a Category of One. Read E-Myth Revisited. Read business books. Take a day off from patient care to start with and commit to using that day really, really well. All right, have it organized almost like your normal clinic day where you've got appointments scheduled all day long. Take that day and have it blocked out. What am I going to do from 8 to 8:30, 8:30 to 9? Who am I meeting with? What am I reading? What's the purpose of this time? And sort of redeem the time well. So it's learn, read, recognize you don't know everything, ask people for help, understand that there's somebody out there smarter than you in that topic. Go talk to them.
Definitely. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask? Anyone? Any questions out there? Any curiosities? So the question was, how do you go about hiring or finding the right doctors for your clinic when you have, so many of them?
It's an ongoing challenge. It's part of my job description is to find doctors and to find clinics. That's what I do almost full time now. You got to go to the schools and meet students when they're third year, fourth year. If you wait until they've graduated, gotten their degrees, passed your state boards, most of the really good ones have already got jobs. And that's certainly true in North Carolina. Word of mouth, you got to treat people really, really well, and then they will recommend their friends to come work for you. Be willing to let students follow you in the exam room. One of my very best docs followed me in the exam room some. The more ways you can plug in with them early in the process, the better. Yeah, listen, you got to pay them well. You got to give them good benefits. You got to do that stuff well. Do you value them? Do you give them a voice? Yeah, you own the business. I don't think a lot of the younger docs in particular really want to own a business necessarily. They still want to be heard. They want their opinion to matter, and for us it does, and that matters a lot to being able to recruit good people.
And how do you keep all of your staff and all of your doctors with so many practices feeling, part of the community? Because, you can definitely lose touch and communication with some of them, I'm sure. with so many practices, you might not go into a practice, physically go in there for
Right.
months at a time, maybe.
Yep.
And so they might not even.
Yeah, certainly it's one of the things you have to be willing to give up. You don't get to be a part of everything, and that means some things are going to happen that aren't quite as good as what it would have been if you had been there. You've got to have your leadership team has to understand your vision, mission, values, your philosophy really well, because they're the ones who will touch it more often. You got to have a lot of meetings. So all of our locations have an office manager. They have a monthly meeting. They have a weekly call. Our doctors, we have quarterly calls, we have quarterly provider meetings where we all get together and break bread together and fellowship together. We do medical mission trips, both locally and internationally, where we send people from multiple offices on the same trip together. We do everything we can to try to generate team and family and build those relationships closely. And I think that particularly for younger docs, it's not just about a paycheck. They want to feel like they're a part of something important. And we've gotten to a size where, okay, we can send folks on mission trips. It resonates.
Yeah, that's great. Well, any other questions? So the question was regarding when you're that big, do you become a target for private equity and takeovers? And what is your feeling on that?
So yes, as we've grown, certainly I get called often. A couple of the groups, I think I was on their speed dial for a while. But here's the deal, we're really enjoying what we're doing. I'm in my early 50s, I have 6 kids, I'm gonna need to do this a lot longer. My partner has 4 kids, he's gonna need to do it a lot longer. But more importantly, we really enjoy what we're doing. I don't know how to run a restaurant. I know how to do optometry. As long as I'm healthy and able, I'm gonna keep investing into people and into the profession that God has used to bless my family richly over the years, and it's just the right thing to do. So we have no plans to do anything like that. We like what we're doing and are going to keep growing. And we're at 16 today. I think we'll be at 20 or 21 by the end of the year, and I'm going to keep doing it.
It's a lot of practices.